Hello and welcome everyone to another Blueprint London webinar, the first one of 2022. So welcome back and Happy New Year. So today we're dealing with event-driven architecture, and with me I have two people who have no problem telling the difference between events and a party. And I've got Shawn McAllister from Solace. Hi, Shawn.
Hi, Andy. Nice to be here.
And I've got Mike Ferguson from Intelligent Business Strategies. Hi, Mike.
Hi, Andy. Nice to be here too. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. So I'm just going to do a quick roundup of some of the housekeeping of before the event, and then I'm going to throw it over for Mike and Shawn to have their conversation about event-driven architecture. Firstly, of course, these sessions are designed to be interactive, so please ask as many questions as you can in the question box underneath your screen there. Some context as to why we're talking about this today. The Event-Driven Architecture Summit, EDA Summit, happened at the Blueprint London physical event last year. And so you'll see in the attachments, which again, just beneath your screen, we have a host of resources for you. Some of the other talks that happened at the EDA Summit in London, some great videos there. We've got the results of the Global EDA survey and some help with, from an architect's guide to EDA. If you have any problems with the stream today, you shouldn't, but just in case, hit refresh in the browser. You should be able to jump straight back in. However, without further ado, I'd like to throw it over to the main part of the presentation. So over to you, Mike.
Okay, thank you, Andy. And once again, welcome, Shawn. Shawn, of course, Chief Technology Officer and Chief Product Officer of Solace, which is a company that he's been at for more than 20 years and worked with customers on transforming their businesses with event-driven architectures. It's a big topic, Shawn. I mean, there's a lot of hype out there, I guess, around all of this, and certainly, from what I can see, a lot of companies seem to be very interested now in the whole world of real-time data. And so before we kind of get into the nitty-gritties, if you like, of event-driven architecture, perhaps we could just start with what is an event-driven architecture. Maybe you could break that down.
Yeah, no, that's a good place to start. And so thanks for having me on, Mike. And yeah, so it's a good place to start, and it is becoming very popular. EDA is becoming popular, at a headline level because it provides real-time and decoupling. But you go, okay, but what's it all about? What does it really mean, right? And so the first thing is that EDA, as it says, is event-driven architecture. It's not a product that you buy, right? It's a pattern. It is a way of communication. And if I compare that a little bit to perhaps what people understand well, which is REST, which is another way that applications communicate with each other, right? So in REST, you have a consumer that wants access to a service, so they make an HTTP call at the end of the day that maybe goes through an API gateway into a service where you can get information or make a change, but you're effectively communicating my application through an API gateway to another application and getting a response all the time. So it's point to point and it's synchronous, okay? Right. An event-driven architecture is different than that. So there are applications that send messages about something happening, and those applications are called producers, and the message that they send is an event that something happened. And the producer sends it to an intermediary called an event broker and sends it into the broker. The broker goes, yep, I got it. I'll deal with it. And then the next participant is an application called a consumer. And the consumer also connects to this event broker intermediary and can say, hey, I want events of a certain type. Just deliver them to me when they happen. And so as events are produced by producers into the event broker figures out which consumers want which events and asynchronously delivers those events to those consumers for the consumer to react to or do something with.
Okay.
right?
Okay. So it's not like as you say, REST is kind of on demand, if you like, whereas this is absolutely not. It's a publish and a subscribe kind of an approach. Is that right?
Exactly. And so the properties become things like it's completely asynchronous, right? When I produce an event and you're going to receive it, Mike, you may not be connected, you may be behind. Doesn't matter. I produced my event. You get it whenever you want it. The other property is that these systems are publish subscribe, which means I produce an event once, and that event can be delivered to many interested parties and at different times, right? You might get it right away because you're available. Another system may be overloaded, so they get it later. And these are all the kind of the decoupling ways where in REST, if you're not available, if I'm doing something and I want to get information from you and you're not available, I can't get that information and I'm stuck. Or I can't tell you something because you can't receive it, right? Whereas with an event-driven architecture, I push it into the event broker and it gets delivered later and it gets processed later. And if I need a response, I might get one later, etc.
So this is far more dynamic in that regard.
Right. Yeah. More dynamic and more real time, right? And draw a bit of a comparison again. If I'm processing an application, I'm doing some processing and I want some information, I want to get it when I want it, which is good use of REST and APIs, for example.
Right.
If I want to be told about something when it happens, right? So I might want to find out about the status of a flight right now, right? For something that I'm doing, so I can query, get the information about the flight.
Right.
But I may also want to be told when something changes about the flight. And what I don't want to do is constantly ask you, Mike, so what's going on with that flight? Has that flight changed? Has that flight changed? I don't want to do that because it's a lot of noise in the system. I just want to be told when it happens.
Right.
Right.
So perhaps then we could dig into that a little bit more. I mean, could you give some examples of kind of business use cases around this? I mean, we often see in computing today, people talk about, the operational side of a business and the analytical side of a business. But I mean, I'm sure there are plenty of use cases of this in both of those camps. But could you throw a little bit of light on that, to give us a kind of, popular use cases of this right now?
Yeah, for sure. And so maybe I'll start to understand the use cases. Maybe I'll start by giving examples of what even we mean by events, right, in a business context, right? And because at the end of the day, we live in an event-driven world and events are actually all around us. And so things like, if you're a retail bank, right, then acquiring a new customer, opening an account, those are events. Withdrawing money from your account, making a payment, all of these things are events. If you think about industrial manufacturing, right? So monitoring equipment, temperature, vibration, oil pressure, changes in any of those things are events. If you think about logistics, right? A truck arrives and has a pallet with a whole bunch of goods that need to be stored in a warehouse. Well, the arrival of that truck and the goods that are on it, those are all events that occur in your business. And so if you get into then, use cases and how these things are used, I mean, event-driven architecture has become very popular now, but, some industries actually used it 20 years ago, which is when, Solace started. And a good example is capital markets. So buying and selling stocks, bonds, commodities, foreign exchange currencies. Wall Street in North America digitized, somewhere around 20 years ago, where you had the need to have, people buy and sell stock, for example, right? And so you can't buy a stock unless you know what the price is. And knowing what that price was yesterday is interesting. Knowing what it is right now when I'm about to buy is critical. And so capital markets went down the path where they needed to just very broadly distribute information, right? How much do you want? How much is being offered to buy or sell a stock? And they needed to do this in real time because I need to know the price now, not a year from now. So that's an example of a use case of distributing order information to participants who then price information to participants. Then I issue an order. That's an event. It might match and create a trade. That is an event. And people build ecosystems and algos around these things.
Okay. All right. So in that sense, given that those kind of discussions, as you said, Solace has been going for 20 years. So what's different, if you like, from what's currently going on in enterprises about this? What are the real business benefits that EDA kind of brings to the table?
Yeah, so I think if you think about kind of exactly how things have evolved, right, and capital markets, betting and gaming into into retail, for example, into manufacturing and customer expectations, has really been this notion of real time, and that's really been one big key aspect. And I'll get to the business benefits in a second, but real time has been very important, and move to the cloud is also something that has been, and decentralization of systems is also something that has been driving the use or the need for EDA. And so really what's happened is what happened in capital markets expanded to all these other industries, if you will, right? And so to your point about, what is the benefit or why do I care about these things? And I think it depends on who you are, right? So if you're a technologist, why do technologists care, or how do they benefit from EDA? And there's some technical reasons, like the decoupling of the publisher and the consumer that I spoke of, right? The act of having that decoupling to a technologist means that the system's more robust. So if you're busy, I can still get on with my work because I have this intermediary that I produce an event, and if you're busy, you'll get it later. Or if you've crashed, you'll get the information later. You're not holding me up. EDA systems scale better because of that. And I can add, different types of microservices for different uses and just scale those different microservices. And I don't have long rest call chains. I can just dump an event in, people get it whenever they like. I don't have to build query offload systems. Remember I was saying, like, if you want to know if a flight has changed, you'd have to keep querying, whereas now, poof, it can just be delivered to you. And so I don't have this background query load. And then the final thing is for technologists is it makes it a lot easier to distribute information because it's publish, subscribe, right? So you produce an event, like an account has been opened in a bank, right? Or do another one, do a payment. So a payment has occurred, right? So that can go into a pub sub bus, and of course your account can be adjusted. You can then run analytics to look for fraud detection. And there's a whole bunch of applications that you can build on top of that, right?
Right.
And the systems are faster to build because I have access to this information in real time without having to poll, without in the past having to do, ETLs at the end of the day, extract, transfer, and load, where at the end of the day or at the end of the week, I would get, a batch file that says, here are all the accounts that are opened, do something with them. It's not very, that ease of access of information is key. Then to the business people,
and I guess more timely in that regard too, I guess, right?
Yeah, exactly. And this is a key business driver as well. So why, if I'm a business person, I want my systems to be robust, but I'll let my technologists figure out how to do that. And EDA does that. But if I'm a business person and I want, access to real-time information, I don't want to know how my business was doing yesterday. I want to know now. I want to provide a better customer experience to my customers, right? To your point. So, if I do something, I'll give you an example of a use case, right? So if I'm boarding a plane and my being on this plane, or Mike, you get on a plane in the days when you used to be able to do that easily.
Really? What's a plane?
Yeah, and we hope to do that soon again. But you get on a plane and you're going to cross some threshold where now you become, some super elite passenger, right? If you know about that in real time, then the attendant on the plane can maybe give you a glass of champagne or something to make you feel special and good about it. And from a business person's point of view, I would want to engage my customers and give them a good user experience, and I can only do that if.
So what you're saying here is, like, I could get on a plane, and even though, like, pre-pandemic I would fly like 70 return flights a year, no, 35 return flights a year, 70 flights, right? and I was a pretty loyal customer, but I sat in economy. I could get champagne in economy. I mean, that's
Well,
awesome.
maybe, or better yet, like they would move you to first class or business class or something, right?
Even better. I mean, my goodness, we need to get that rolled out into the airlines quickly. I'm definitely sure
Yeah,
of that.
no, exactly.
So I guess what
Exactly.
you're saying though is that this could this isn't restricted to a specific vertical. I mean, you
Not at
definitely
all.
see that this is becoming um, industry wide. It's a horizontal thing rather than a vertical thing.
Absolutely, yeah. And the other, absolutely, and the other thing related to that and different verticals and why business people care is that it's also enabling new business models,
Right.
actually. And so, for example, we have a client of ours whose business is elevators and escalators. Another one who it is printers. And those businesses have historically been transactional, right? You buy some of like elevators and escalators for your airport, your office tower. They get installed, and you're kind of done unless something goes wrong and you call for service, right? But now more and more these are becoming as a service, and so with an event-driven architecture, speaking of elevators and escalators, you can monitor in real time what's happening on those elevators and escalators, right? Are they jammed? What are the vibration? What are the heat of specific elements? And now you can do predictive maintenance. So instead of when you're traveling, Mike, you show up at the airport, you got all your luggage and the elevator's stuck and you're like, oh, I got to carry this up the stairs all myself, right? Or that's not a good experience for you, right? Whereas if through predictive maintenance, you can schedule these types of maintenance activities during low periods to stop the elevator or the escalator from breaking, that's a value to the owner of the building or the airport. And it's a business model that then other businesses can take advantage of.
Okay, that's probably a good time to ask Andy to put a poll up here, and let's see, what's happening out there with regards to this in our listeners to all of this. Andy, can you start the poll?
Yes, the poll started now. It should be underneath your screen there. Just click the relevant option.
So do I have time to poll you, Mike? Or do you want to do it?
Of course.
Okay. So I don't know.
While we're waiting on that.
Yeah, exactly. So I know it takes a little while to come up. But so just for our viewers, we commissioned a survey back in August where we asked 800 people about kind of the state of EDA maturity. Okay, and that's one of the links that we can provide. But there's some key takeaways from that, and I wanted to ask Mike what he thinks, and then kind of give the survey results, and then we'll match that against the audience's survey.
Awesome,
right?
This is where you really hang me out to dry.
No, not at all. Because I think people will be just depends on your view of how things are mature.
Okay.
Ready to go? Okay.
Ready to go.
So if you think about organizations recognizing the business value of adopting EDA, so what percentage of businesses do you think believe that there is value to adopting EDA today in our survey?
I don't know, maybe 35%.
Turns out, survey said 85%.
Wow. Okay. Way off base there. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. I have two more follow-ups, and then we can put it together. But so 85% of businesses overall thought that there was value in adopting EDA. Right.
Okay.
Now, among the IT personas in the business, how many do you think? What percentage do you think of that category appreciate the value of real-time data distribution, which is part of EDA?
Oh, I think that would definitely be higher. I'm going to go for 70 this time.
So, yeah, interestingly enough, so 61%.
Oh, okay.
Right, so you're pretty close, actually,
okay.
Relatively speaking, right? So 61% of IT professionals they surveyed said they believe that real-time distribution is important. And similarly, though, if you kind of go to the business leadership and you go, how many of you are aware of EDA and appreciate its value from a business perspective? What would you think that is?
From a business perspective, I'm probably going to say about 60, because I'm not so sure they would fully get it. You know, I mean, they'd have to understand it before they could, make sense of whether it might add value to the business. And stick my neck out and say 60.
So your qualitative interpretation is correct. They don't appreciate it as much, but interestingly, it's quite a bit lower. It's 35%.
Wow. Okay. But that tells me that there's an educational element needed here, right? I mean, in order to get that. Okay. Maybe we can look at the results of the poll, Andy. Is that something you can show on the screen?
So you're able to see they're displayed for everybody. All the people who are viewing it underneath, you'll be able to see it if you click on the little poll icon with a number by it on the right hand side of your screen. If you can't find it, I can give you a lowdown, but you should be able to.
I got it. Okay. So survey says, do you currently utilize event-driven architectures somewhere in your organization? 19% saying yes for operational use cases, 14% for analytical use cases, and 14% for both. But over half saying no, not yet. Interesting. Well, I mean that's good though. I mean, it clearly shows adoption in both areas, in both operational and analytical. Although naturally you'd expect operational to be a little bit more. I mean, this being a real-time kind of operational use case would be pretty compelling.
Yeah.
Okay. Really good. Okay, so given that, then, I mean, what kind of events are there? I mean, you given some example of these business events. Is there? But I kind of think about all kinds of things. I'm being a technician, I'm a kind of a stack guy, and I'm thinking like events at all kind of levels here. I mean, is there what kind of events would you say there are that are relevant here in the context of an event-driven architecture? I mean, is there some of those things or all of those things, or what is it?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of them because there's a lot of things happening in a business, obviously, right? And it really depends on what kind of business that you're in, right? So if you're, for example, we have lots of businesses who have supply chain and fulfillment type events, right? So logistics and supply chain, inventory changes, all of those kinds of changes are discrete events. And whether it is, as an example, let's do a retail business, for example. I show up to a store, I pick a bunch of things off the shelf, and I go and I purchase them, right? Well, the purchase of each of those items is an event. The fact that it's off the shelf is useful information to replenish the shelf, to replenish the back end. The fact that I have purchased it and associating points with my loyalty points, that's an event. Opening and closing an account, a purchase that occurs, all these, an IoT, for example, on various sensors, as we talked about.
Right.
All of these things are events. And in some cases, and I should say, as much as those are all things happening, if you think about almost any database change from a digital point of view, any database change is an event because it's the change of the state of something that you care about in your business.
So in a way, okay, these events could happen at various levels, at kind of infrastructure levels, but they can also have, the big compelling play is all of these business events. So let me ask you another question then. I mean, one of the problems I see a lot in the consulting work that I do, and I focus more on the data and analytics side than I do the operational side. But even so, I mean, one of the things I see a lot is that a lot of companies can't tell me, what they currently have. I mean, like, for example, if I ask them about, well, what kind of master data entities do you have in your organization? Or what kind of transaction types are there within your organization? Or what are your data sources in your organization? A lot of the time they can't tell me. So how does a business even know, what they have in terms of events that are what these are. I mean, to me, that seems to be a major. Well, it's not a roadblock. Well, it is a roadblock if you don't know what they are. But I mean, getting an inventory of these things, I think, is a pretty critical thing, right?
Yeah, I think it depends on what aspect you are. Certainly in the operation, in the kind of the analytics case, for sure, because you're looking for patterns, right? And so you need to be able to find the needle in the haystack, but you have to give me the hay, for me to look through it. And so that's definitely, that's always a challenge as to where that data is and how to get access to it. Then on the operational side, I think people have a better understanding of that to some degree because, you have your CRM, you have your ERP, you have these different crown jewels that run your business, that are that run your processes in your business and applications perhaps that need to be integrated. And all these things have databases, which, okay, you have to be able to find these systems and these databases and have an inventory of that. But in a lot of cases, some of the crown jewels, people know about them because, people constantly want access to this information or that information, or you've built query offload capabilities because so many people are reading it.
Right.
And so, you could boil the ocean and try to find everything. But I think in most cases, people kind of, start with something a little bit more tactical. I think the analytics side, as you point out, is more difficult because you're trying to gather lots of data from lots of places. That's more difficult.
But just getting the basic operational set of events, I guess that's going to involve business as well as IT, though, right? I mean, as Java developers are not going to have all that in their heads of whatever business they're in. I mean, it's going to be a partnership, isn't it? I guess.
100%. Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, which projects you take on, you don't just kind of event enable your whole business.
Obviously, right. And I guess business priorities will have an influence on that as to, in order to achieve business, certain high priority areas and high priority outcomes, I guess.
100%.
Yeah. Okay. I got it. All right. So I guess on the analytical side, you mentioned patterns a moment ago. I mean, to me, there's in analytics, it's probably not just one event. It might be a combination of things that when they happen within a particular time window or something, then you're going to want to do something. I mean, is that what you're seeing as an example of an analytical use case? I mean, obviously there's operational uses that you want to cause. The whole publish and subscribe model results in a more fluid kind of way of operating. But in the analytical side, teasing out this combination of things in order to sort of indicate some kind of condition that you would want to act on. Is that what you're kind of seeing?
Yeah, and for sure. And I think that, kind of analytics is one effectively use case of an event-driven architecture. And we'll kind of come back to kind of the multi-use case in a second, right? But yeah, you want it from an analytics point of view, you want in many cases to get information from multiple places, or at the very least, even if it's a common place, if you look at, temperature changes and pressure changes and vibration changes in a machine over time, are the types of things that you'd want to do, to have access to in real time and to correlate to then go, oh, I'm predicting impending failure, right? Similarly, whenever you do fraud analysis, right, you want to be able to look for different types of purchases within a certain time, right? Years ago when the internet wasn't so prominent, right, I was going to London, as it turns out, and online I booked a ticket for a train to London to Paris, jumped in my car, went and bought gas at a local gas station. Boom, my card is instantly declined, because how can you be buying a ticket in London and be in Canada at the same time now? Okay, figured out that was a bad correlation. But yeah, to your point, you take in these different events, sometimes from different sources, and you apply these patterns, right?
Right.
For sure. And what I was going to say as well, though, is there's a mixture of these things, because as you get into operational use cases where things are happening in your business and having publish subscribe, you can then, again, back to the multi-uses, you can have analytics being a consumer of these events off your publish subscribe environment, your
right.
event environment. And so that is, again, another source of real-time information to feed into, your pattern matching, because that's how you can respond to these things in more real time, right? So they are analytics, but they can be part of your operational system because they can affect, the types of things you do. I'll give you an example. We have clients of ours in the airline business, right? And so again, in the days when you used to be able to travel and you scan a boarding pass, right? Well, there is millions of boarding passes being scanned all the time. And you go, well, who really cares about that? Well, if you scan your boarding pass and you make that real-time event available broadly to an airline, what you can do then, for example, is you can feed it to an analytics system that says, we've boarded 50 people. There's 250 people on the plane. How long did that take? There is no way we're boarding on time. So now I take action based on that. I give up my runway slot. Well, first of all, I predict when I'll be able to be done boarding. I give up my runway spot, book a new one, reallocate my grounds crew because they're not going to be done loading the luggage. And so the next plane they're supposed to go to, they won't make it on time. And then, as I say, if you send that to the loyalty system, then Mike gets his, glass of champagne on the plane, right?
Or an upgrade.
Right? And so it's not, it is the real-time nature, but it's the distributing of this throughout. And in many cases, the analytics system that's doing these kinds of predictive type of behaviors can then itself generate another event into the system for people to take action, right? That's where the benefit is.
Okay. So you can kind of get this escalation or chain reaction, if you want to call it that.
Exactly.
Okay, pretty powerful. All right then. So, given all of that capability, I mean, what are you going to do to make this happen?
Yeah, that's a good good question. I mean, so there's kind of I think there's three aspects of things to talk about, right? One is the technology that's required, and this is a technical show, so we'll get into that and just deep dive into that. But like any new technology, the culture of an organization needs to change to adopt and think this new way. Think events, not APIs only, not databases only, not file transfers, not ETLs only. You have to understand, to your point, what is an event? Who cares about it? What's the business value? And think that way. So that a kind of cultural change. And then, as with any new technology, there's skills and best practices and tooling. Also, you have to, teach people how to do this, right? And how to adopt best practices so that even coming back to number one, even if you have good technology, you're using it in the right way, right? To be effective. Yeah.
Right. So I guess you're going to, I mean, from a developer's perspective, an application developer perspective, does that mean, whether used or writing REST calls? I mean, is there some major change they've got to be able to do from an application point of view in order to, really take advantage of event-driven architectures?
There might be and there might not be, right? So it depends on what I'll give you some examples. We have clients, for example, who are redesigning their payments systems in banks or redesigning their fulfillment systems to be real time. So in that case, they're taking their monolith application that was, difficult to evolve, difficult to release new features in, et cetera. And they're breaking and, difficult to scale. We know the problems with monolithic deployments. And so now they're breaking it up into a more distributed type of application. Right. And in some cases, they need to make synchronous REST calls between them, and that's fine. But in many other cases, generating an event and having things occur in the background or occur in parallel is what you want to do. And so to your point, there are certainly technical frameworks like Spring Cloud Streams that allow you to abstract some of the technical aspects of eventing and focus on your business logic. And other people want to write, POJOs from scratch or, things like that. And so then they do have to learn more mechanics. Still, in that kind of a microservice environment, you need to think about the interactions between your applications. And so where you used to think about exposing a RESTful endpoint, now you think about exposing an event and defining that event and the schemas and the payloads of that event. Right. And so in addition to, the technical, how do I build my application, people should be thinking about, tooling for that. And so coming to market now are thoughts of things like event portals, for example. That's what we call it. That is what Gartner calls it, which are design tools that allow you to design your applications, the event interfaces, the schemas, and define these better, right? What is this event? When is it initiated? What does it mean? What are the semantics of the fields of the data that it carries, etc.
So
And some of this stuff,
kind of like building up a registry of all of these events.
that is exactly right. Yeah, exactly.
Oh, okay.
And
Yeah, that makes
then,
a lot of sense.
yeah. Then another. So that's kind of if you're building microservices. Another example is very much what we see clients do is that they take some, in terms of how do they start or what do they learn is they take a system of record that is their crown jewels and they start to expose the events from that system of record, right? Every payment that occurs, every customer change that occurs, every inventory change that occurs, and they emit those events into their environment. And so, and then users then of that, can need to be able to have a catalog, to your point, where they go and they can go, what events related to customers or inventory are accessible to me? When did they happen? What data did they carry? And then I can subscribe to those events and build my applications and be told when these things happen, as opposed to having to pull for them all the time. If there's something that I need to do in a reactive way, whether it's analytics or whether it's operational.
And I hear about event mesh. Could you explain a little bit more about that? I mean, you talked about brokers, you talked about portal, talked about a registry or catalog of events here. I mean, where does this event mesh fit in?
Yeah, that's a great question. So an event mesh is, again, another kind of, it's an architectural layer in your IT stack. And so if people on the call are familiar with service mesh within a Kubernetes environment, where service mesh provides communication for typically restful interactions between two services. And it does routing and it does security and it helps you with blue-green deployment, and it abstracts that from your applications. And an event mesh is to EDA what service mesh is to REST. And what it basically is we talked about, one event broker that producers and consumers connect to exchange events. It's not that simple in an enterprise, right? You have on-prem, you have private cloud, you have multiple public clouds, you have distribution centers, stores, things like that, I think people want to connect in real time. So when you take these event brokers and you deploy them in these multiple places, you want to connect them together so that a purchase that's done in a store can be delivered to your event broker in the store. And maybe that one event goes off to Google for analytics, or it goes on to AWS for a microservice, or it goes off to somewhere else for some system of record, maybe back on-prem into a data center. But that one event that occurred goes wherever it needs to be in your distributed environment. And so this event mesh is this networking together, this connecting together of these event brokers, and results in maybe what people could think about as the internet of events for your enterprise, where I can produce an event someplace, a boarding pass scan in an airport, and it goes to all the places that it's supposed to go automatically without anybody having to worry
And I
about
guess, you could end up with quite a lot of these. So, I mean, is there any way to organize them or, kind of, so you don't lose track of these things? I mean, we don't want to, land ourselves in a sea of events, is there any way that we can organize these things or govern all of that?
Yeah, that is an excellent question. And so I use the internet. If you think about the internet today, right, you can connect anywhere, but the internet really became useful when Google, among others, indexed it, right? So you could find what you want, what you're interested in, which is your catalog, click on a link and go to a website somewhere. So exactly to your point, this event mesh is this, the ability to move events wherever they need to go, but you need to know what's on there, right? What information is available to you? How do I find it? What does it mean? Who's allowed to consume it? And this is where products, like I was saying a bit before, about this event portal come to play. And event portals to EDA are a lot like API management systems to the API world. So you have API gateways that manage traffic back and forth, but really APIs became dominant when developers could go somewhere and understand what endpoints they had access to build the composite applications.
Right.
And so Event Portal is very much like that. And you need to be able to say, here's an event, here's version 1, here's version 2, I'm deprecating version 1. Only certain people can get access to this event. You need to lifecycle manage it, govern it, etc., so that the events that are being sent on your event mesh, you actually get business value out of them. Because without an event portal, you don't get a lot of reuse, right? And reuse is the key aspect.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, so what about the opposite side of this? I mean, obviously, what are some of the challenges, if you like, in adopting an event-driven approach?
Yeah. So among the challenges, there's kind of technical challenges, and then there's human challenges, right? And I talk, a little bit in terms of what do you need to get going are embedded in both, right? So I think from a technology point of view, there are various building blocks, because as we just talked about, and as your survey showed, and as our survey shows, so EDA, I think people, it is gaining momentum for sure for all the business and technical reasons. And to your point from before, if business people don't appreciate EDAs, it kind of stifles the growth. So it is up to us technologists to have people understand that. So that's one of the challenges, right? Is having business people understand the business value of EDA. The other thing then is, let's say you want to go off and do this, right? Still today, the technology is a little fragmented. It's not as easy as building RESTful applications, right? Because it's not as mature. And so that's one of the things. And I know we and other vendors, we've been putting a lot of effort into putting a platform together that has event brokers and event management, and has management of the event mesh, and offer it as a SaaS, etc., and to fit into frameworks and to do things so that access to the data and building applications is easier. There's more work to be done there. So that's one challenge, right? And depending on what you choose, sometimes you have to put these pieces together yourself, which is a bit of a challenge. And then the other parts are, as we were talking about, is, education and best practices. So there's a lot of people who have, very strong background in RESTful interactions. And, if what you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail, right? And so people sometimes try to solve their problems with the tools, understandably, that they're familiar with and the patterns that they're familiar with. So understanding these new patterns, understanding the new tools, understanding when to apply which, because, I'm a very strong EDA proponent, but, look, not all problems are solved by EDA, of course, right?
Right.
And so I think that, understanding, really getting a grasp of when to use which, what they're good for, how to design your applications that way, and then how to educate, the stakeholders in your enterprise.
But do you not think there's a two-way education thing here? Because on the one side, if all of the events going to come out of these business heads, I think there's a lot of IT professionals are not as business savvy as perhaps the other way around. Business people are more IT savvy, it seems, these days. I mean, it seems to me that the IT folks have got to learn the business events, if you like, in order to be able to articulate what EDA can do for the business. Would you agree?
Oh, 100%. And I mean, there's definitely, business leaders who have strong technical focus. And I deal with a lot of architects, enterprise architects, line of business architects that, their job is to interact with the business. And so as they understand the benefits of EDA, they can position this to the business, right? And offer them the art of the possible. Like the example that I gave about somebody scanning a boarding pass and having the loyalty system pick that up and do something. This was an exact example given to me by, one of our clients, and that came from an architect, right? Because these, the people dealing with loyalty, they don't always know that they could dream of having real-time access to other things happening, to their customers, because it's never happened, right?
Yeah, I mean, to me, this kind of inventory of business events is so exciting, because you get that, and all of a sudden your imagination runs riot as to what you could potentially do, and I think to some extent, that also changes IT professionals' mindsets. I mean, IT professionals are often very kind of exploratory people anyways, but
Yeah.
haven't got a business hook to hang things on. But if they could see that, all of a sudden, they kind of go crazy in their mindset. But I think there's a fantastic partnership to be had here between business and IT to make this happen, and it really also then allows you to articulate what could happen, and kind of how to become a far more dynamically optimized business as a result of it.
Yeah, and agile as well. Because here's the thing: is we've dealt with a lot of businesses where they kind of go, the business has an idea of something they want to build, and then IT goes, okay, to acquire the data on which to build the system, I have to, change this app or do an ETL or do a whole bunch of work. Now I have the data. Now I can embark on my project, and we'll succeed. We'll see if it was successful or not. If the information that you want, as you mature and you take an enterprise view of EDA, if the information that you want is already flowing in real time over this event mesh, and you want to build it, you have an idea for an application, and you can easily get access to that real-time information because A, you can find it because you have a catalog, B, you plug into this event mesh, and I don't wait for somebody else to write some code or to give me an ETL or to change an app. I can plug in and get the information that I want, either as events or event combination of events and API calls. Now I can build my app much more quickly, much more cheaply, and it allows me to innovate. And if it works, great, I continue to invest. If it doesn't work, well, not every experiment works out, but it lowers the barriers to innovation. It allows you to take your ideas and action them quickly from a proactive point of view. And if your competitors do things, it allows you to react to what your competitors have done, again, because you're agile. I want to be fast. I'd rather be fast than always right, because I can't be always right.
Right.
But it's within my control to be fast.
But would you agree, therefore, EDA in a way also triggers this whole real-time data warehousing analytics anyways? I mean, one feeds off of
100%.
the other, right? Yeah.
100%, because some of the ideas that you have are, related to running analytics and looking for the needle in the haystack, and having that data available to you becomes key, because then I can just run my idea.
So in a way, the event mesh is a perfect backbone for a real-time analytical environment in order to kind of tap into that and subscribe
Yep.
to those things. And yeah, okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Cool.
Because again, sometimes people do look at analytics like, I want data from these systems that I have found, as you say, right? I happen to found these, and I want a data pipeline into my analytics, and that's all fine. But if you embrace this holistically, and many of the key systems and changes happening in your enterprise are on this event mesh, then analytics is one user of them. Loyalty is another. Like, so you want to do something like, when you open an account, I'd like to send you a text, right? To welcome you and to give you information about the account from a customer experience point of view, right? I mean, you want to be able to do this in real time. I'll give you
Absolutely. Yeah, I totally get it. I mean, that's one of the other things flashing into my head right now is I'm thinking, well, if I could add observability into the mix in AI, I can even get into self-learning around all of this. I mean, okay, I appreciate that's probably a little bit further out in the horizon, but nevertheless, you can kind of see how this whole self-learning optimization could push a business towards continuous improvement.
Yeah. And this is where it depends on as we talked in the EDA survey that we have talks about this, the level of maturity of EDA adoption, right? And we will sometimes find people adopt it for a point project, and maybe that's fine, and you start that way. That's all okay. Like I said, we have clients of ours that, from a centralized point of view, they've decided that their main integration strategy is through EDA. And so you have, fulfillments and logistics and people, employees and customers. These are all different systems that different people, different organizations own, different lines of business. And they share all that information amongst each other over this event mesh. And this is a strategic initiative. And so from that point on, you can innovate like crazy with all of this information, right? And some people start that way because, that's their vision. That's what they want to embrace. Other enterprises start a little bit, in a point solution and grow from there.
Okay, we're kind of getting close to where we need to start to go and look at some of the questions coming in. But before I do, a couple of questions to kind of wrap this up. I mean, talked about, the event mesh, you talked about brokers, the portal, the registry, and everything that get that going. Some ways in which developers, may have to change and whatnot. But is there any other, if you like, how does all of this integrate? I mean, people have got a huge investment in technologies that they have already out there. I mean, so how does this integrate with you, like with people already have within their organizations from a technology point of view?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, because you could go, hey, this is a new thing. What's the context that it fits in? What do I throw out? Does it stand on its own? Like, what's up,
Right,
right?
exactly.
Yeah, and if I look at like, and I guess my quick answer to that is that it underpins actually many of the initiatives that are happening in an enterprise today, because it allows real-time communication broadly among them. So what do I mean by that? Like, integration today, people do this with ESBs and iPaaS, and they have kind of complicated point-to-point integrations that are fragile and everything. Well, you break that all apart now, and it becomes event-driven. Something happens in one system, you push it into the event mesh, and you integrate it at the edges with the multiple systems. So when a new employee comes on board, your system of record makes that event, and then you integrate that into Workday, ServiceNow, Bamboo, create your Slack account. These are all things that happen kind of separately. So it plays well with integration. It plays well with APIs. So you have a RESTful API on the outside, and you synchronously do things in your microservices. And then the rest of your microservices can do things in the background. Like when you check out of Amazon, it doesn't, debit your credit card right away. It makes an event that says you've checked out. They validate your credit card later because they assume it's going to work. And if it doesn't, they send you an email as an exception, right? Same thing with IoT, the same thing with data meshes, which is a new architectural concept that should be all event driven. Of course, analytics would be underpinned by this. All of these initiatives, hybrid cloud, multi-cloud, you can't be doing synchronous interactions amongst all these clouds and expect this to scale and be robust. It has to become asynchronous. So my point is, all these things that people are thinking, these initiatives that they're doing anyways today, if you have an underpinning of real-time pub-sub event distribution, it helps all of these initiatives become better, become more real-time, become more connected.
Okay, so what would you say, given all of that, how do people get started, if you like, with an event-driven architecture then? Given that there's a lot of people on the poll today, over half of them haven't yet started. So what would you say, are they sort of, the key things that they got to do to get started?
Yeah, because all this stuff I'm talking about might seem a little daunting, right? So, yeah, no, for sure. And so I think it depends on where you are in the organization and kind of your remit, but at an enterprise level, what I would say is you take the systems of record that run your business that most or a lot of other stakeholders are interested in. If you're a payments company, then it's obviously payments, right? If you're a manufacturing company, then it has to do with, maybe your supply chain and your logistics and your inventory, et cetera. But you have discrete systems for those. And even from a technologist point of view, think about the ones where people are pounding your system with read requests, or you're building query offload databases so people can read your information without having to affect your systems of record. And so you take those systems and event enable them. What that means that as things change in your system related to an order or to a process flow, you create events out of those occurrences. And that can be done either by changing the original application or by doing change data capture, which is completely uninvasive. And so you capture the events as they occur in your system, and you push them out into, maybe for starters, an event broker or a network of event brokers, which is Event Mesh. And so now anybody else building applications who wants this information in real time, and because you started with information that is critical to your business, they can have access to it when they want to, right? And as things changes, and build their own apps and make it self-serve. And then what we've typically found is that, from there, it just it just snowballs from there, where people go, wow, I have access to this type of information in real time. Why can't I have that and that and that as well? And it just becomes, more of a snowball effect. And I think it's important, as with any kind of change, to, start with an idea, make sure that it's successful, get a win, get an internal, happy internal customer that has business benefit, and then you build on it from there. Like from
But I think also what you're also saying is, make sure you're not tinkering around the edges here. If you're going to make let's say, a significant business benefit, then look at how it can benefit your core kind of operations rather than tinker around the edges with this thing. I mean, but that makes a lot of sense. Okay, thanks, Shawn. Let's go to the questions. Maybe Andy, you can you can let us know what's coming in from our audience.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I'll keep it. I'll try and keep it nice and brief. So we stay within the times. Thank you both, by the way. I really enjoyed that. I was listening to along there. It's really engaging format. I thought, rather than just leading with the slides, it was great to hear what both of you had to say. I've got a couple of questions from the audience. I'm going to start with one. I know that IT and all these markets are filled with acronyms, and this person's asking, should he be lumping event-driven architecture, EDA, in with technologies like SOA? So I'm guessing I'll slightly reword that question. What's the difference? The difference between EDA and SOA? I suppose best to come to you, Shawn, first on that.
Right. Yeah. So SOA, or the service-oriented architecture, really kind of then evolved into the API economy that we have today, right? And so SOA has, what you effectively do is define services and synchronously get information from it, and that's why it evolved to be RESTful as the new way of doing that, right? And so an event-driven architecture is more the kind of the other side of that coin, actually. So it's not me asking things when I want it, it's me being told about it when it happens. And one thing that I would say is that even just the evolution of these things, I think, are going to converge, where today, so in a couple of fronts, is that people should be thinking about APIs and events as data products that they define and expose. And that's what SOA started, right? Define your interfaces, define your services, reuse them. And I think what we're going to see more and more is, when I define my data products, there will be data products that people can ask for, like, what is the status of my flight? And there will be other data product or related data products where I'm told when a flight changes. And when I go and look about how do I access flight information, it will be when I want it and when it happens, and I get to choose which one is appropriate for my use case. Whereas, and that's why I say, coming back to the question, SOA was just kind of half of that, and as it was basically evolved to be REST and APIs.
Perfect. And given the time situation, apologies to those who's asked questions. I'm going to pick one which I think that both our panelists can contribute to. So a nice, neater way of wrapping things up. What's the future? What's the future for this technology? How's it going to evolve over the next couple of years? Do you think what's a couple of logical steps on for this, and etc. And how widespread do you think it's going to be? I'll send that over to Mike first, and we'll end with Shawn.
I'll give you the analyst point of view from my point of view. Yeah, for me, I think this is super exciting. I really do. I mean, to me, the kind of holy grail out here is self-optimizing business, or even self-learning optimizing business. The whole idea that you can, as soon as something happens, cause other things to happen across your business in order to keep your business running optimally, I think is a super exciting thing. Like, kind of squeezing out all of the inefficiencies and costs out of a business. There's so much return on investment out of all of that. I think as well, the whole analytical side around this, you know, we've been talking about streaming analytics for many years, but I kind of think there's a hierarchy of things here. You know, like if I'd spot a pattern, as Shawn was talking about earlier, within an event mesh or within all the events that are out there, I spot a pattern, I can issue another event which other things could be looking out for, and so and you can cause complete chain reactions across the business to keep everything running optimally, and so I think that, and plus the what I alluded to earlier, the AI and the self-learning thing. I mean, that really takes us into a super exciting area of real-time data-driven self-learning business. I mean, heck, that'll keep us going for at least 5 years. I mean, to me, that's where this is going. I think to me, there's a critical piece though, and the piece is we got to get that inventory. We got to get that inventory of what those events are, because to me, that's the thing that really leads to imaginations opening up and new business models and everything coming from it. I think that's a big stake in the ground I would want to see, get done pretty early on.
100%. 100% agree with that. And the impact even on customer experience as well. You spoke about the internal business benefits, 100%. And then customer experience, to be able to have personalized, contextual journeys for your customers, also key. And to your point, and for the listeners, exactly the API, look at the difference that APIs have made to the world. It has made, commerce, e-commerce possible. People have built applications, composite applications, bringing together a whole bunch of different capabilities for a particular user, things that nobody could have imagined when you define these discrete little API endpoints. But look at what it's transformed in, in business and consumer lives. And that was made possible, to your point, because there's a way to do this with REST, and then there's catalogs for these things. So for our viewers, take a look at event portals, study up on that, because if you can't find the events, it's not useful. My 2 cents, to your question, Andy, is that I think this is going to become as pervasive, frankly, as APIs and REST, because it's the other side of the coin, and it's real time. And it unlocks, the possibilities that Mike just touched on, and so many more things, even outside of analytics, in terms of application integrations, in terms of intelligent devices. It's just going to be incredible, the change that I believe it's going to make, because more and more and more, we all want real time. Look at what Uber did, for example, right? I can order, and this is obviously a long time ago, but I can order a car whenever I want. I can see it approaching in real time. I mean, people want that today, right? And events are the way to make that happen, frankly, because the world is event driven, and we are impatient, increasingly impatient.
No, I would totally agree with that. Yeah, no, people have come to expect it now. The genie's out of the bottle, isn't it? If they can do it in one context, they expect to do it in every context, and that's. It does become it does become sort of self-fulfilling, and any airlines out there who can work out a way to upgrade Mike Ferguson, he engages with the app.
Absolutely. I hope that's a built-in feature on Solace, by the way.
Yeah, straight onto the development pipeline. I'd like to extend my thanks again to you two. I think it's been really great, and like I said, I've really enjoyed the format and the conversational element. There's lots and lots to learn about event-driven architecture, as you can imagine, as you will have picked up throughout the course of the show. And I'll just mention it again. All those resources from the EDA Summit are attached to this webinar. You'll be able to see them in attachments. There's 4 or 5 different talks. There's surveys. There's architects' guides. There's all sorts of things in there. So do take advantage of that if this is an area that you're looking to explore in the next 6 months or so. So yeah, just take advantage of that. With further ado, it's time to close off proceedings. So thanks again, Shawn. Thanks, Mike. Thanks everybody at home, and we'll see you at the next one in a few weeks. Okay, thank you very much.
Great.
Cheers. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everybody.